Just a second.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you. Okay, so we're live on Facebook. So ladies and gentlemen, as my great privilege as the current president of Tri-State, to welcome the first president of the Tri-State Railway Historical Society, Mike Wikman. Mike is tuning in tonight from all the way from Texas, so we greatly appreciate the privilege that technology grants us. And we're just so excited to have you back and have you talk about some of your life experiences, starting Tri-State, your career, and basically anything you want to talk to us about. So, Mike, you can share your screen, and the floor is yours.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine.
Okay, I'm gonna get rid of this screen here in a minute. We can. How's this look? I mean, the share screen didn't work.
Yeah, I don't see anything popped up yet.
No. All right, click on this.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right, I see your screen.
Want me to open the Zoom meeting?
No, you don't have to click that. Just bring up your slide.
Well, I'm not going to do the slides right this minute. Okay.
Okay.
Let me start at the beginning. Number one, I would like to thank all of you for including me on this, because I sure have a lot of love for the state of New Jersey, because I lived up there most of my life. But I don't know how many people know me in the group. I see a lot of names of people. I don't know who they are, but don't forget, I'm 88 years old, for crying out loud. I'm so damn old I can't spell that. I can't add up my fingers. But what I'm getting at is, I was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Wait till you hear this. 1934. That's a lot of years ago. So I just want you to know a little bit about me, because if you've got somebody talking about the railroad or is talking about a certain part of the railroad, I'm gonna center in on the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western. That's where I started. I mean, that's my first job on a railroad. Well, yes and no. I'm going to back up a little bit. As I say, I was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I lived up in Clark Summit. If everybody knows the Lackawanna, how it is, Clark Summit was up the hill from Scranton. And back in the day, in the 1940s, we would see steam. So really, that's where it all started with me. It started in a simple thing, like my father took me down and showed me what a 3-cylinder steam locomotive sounded like. Well, the Lackawanna 1450s, they had it. And Lackawanna had some beautiful power, the 1600s. Well, okay. But I lasted in Clark Summit, Pennsylvania until I was 11 years old. But I always wanted to be a locomotive engineer. My father used to give me 8 cents on a Saturday when I was 8 years old. And he would take me to the station and leave me there, and I would get a half fare ticket to ride between Clark Summit and Scranton. And I would ride on a Saturday. My father worked half a day on Saturday, so I would go down to Scranton station and he would pick me up there. And I would just watch trains. I mean, to me, that was living heaven. Every half an hour, there was a certain train out of Scranton going either way, both ways. But of course, at the station, you'd see the passenger trains, and I got to know some of the crews because I was down there every Saturday. And my father would take me around to the Delaware and Hudson. Scranton was a rail fan's paradise, and I guess back in those days, you could call me a rail fan. And I believe I'm a rail fan even today. I'll get into that a little bit later about becoming an officer on the railroad, which I was on the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western, Erie, Lackawanna, and the CNJ. I was the road foreman of engines with the Lackawanna, but I'll get to that. So I lasted in Clark Summit until about I was 11 years old. We moved to a place called Buffalo, New York. That was the other end of the Lackawanna. And we moved up there for 2 years while I went to school. And of course, in 2 years, that was another adventure for me. Now, what is in East Aurora, New York? The Pennsylvania Railroad, the Buffalo Division. Freight trains run with I-1s. Freight train, passenger trains with K4s, G5s, Es. All kinds of power came up in that. East Aurora was a rail fan's paradise. For me, it was. I got to know the crews. I got to know the agent at the station, and I did a lot of little things there. But I had really some of the greatest time of my life riding on the I-1s with engineers down to Machias Junction, where they would push trains from Buffalo to Machias, and then they run back to East Aurora. One thing good about that place is the snow belt. I mean, they don't get inches of snow up there. They used to get feet of snow. So the plows were used quite a bit out of Buffalo. But of course, I was only there a short, only 2 years. And of course, that was the end of the war in 1946. And of course, I ended up, my father got transferred again. And this is where I arrived in New Jersey. My father got a job in New York City as a vice president of his corporation. And we moved to Maplewood, New Jersey, where I spent quite a few good years, not too long. But Maplewood, New Jersey, I got to know everybody on the Lackawanna. Station agents, the people I used to hang around at the station, got to know the crews. I'd ride into Hoboken every Saturday. And from Hoboken, I would go to the Erie Terminal or the New York Central Terminal, Jersey Central, of course, over in New York. What would you have in New York for rail fans? Number one, the subway system. I rode every mile of it. And also, I used to stop in Grand Central and on the Penn Station, New York. And I got to know engineers and conductors and brakemen there. And they let me ride to Washington, D.C. and things like this. Was just a rail fan's paradise to me with Saturdays. But I'll tell you about later on in my life, on Saturdays, I found out there was girls. That's another thing. I'll just go through it quickly about where I went from that point. I mean, I went in Maplewood. We ended up getting, my father retired and we moved down to the Jersey Shore. And you know what's at the Jersey Shore, the New York and Long Branch. And by that time, there was Campbell running down there with Ford. You had the Jersey Central and the Pennsylvania right there in Red Bank. And Red Bank, I got to know the towerman. Maybe some of you people remember the name Bill Burke. Bill Burke was a well-known rail fan. He was a towerman at Red Bank, and I was just, I was younger than him. I used to sit up there and talk to him, and I sure remember the day of the Woodbridge wreck. All of you know about the Woodbridge wreck. 83 people lost their lives that night. And I went up there on the wrecker out of Red Bank. We had a wrecker there in Red Bank, and of course, the adventures I had on the New York and Long Branch was just fabulous. But of course, now we're at my period of time. I'm 18 years old, and I wanted a job on the railroad. So I went up and saw Mr. Craddock. Anybody remember the name Craddock? He was superintendent of the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western and Hoboken. I used to hang around Hoboken, and everybody knew me. This is the neat part of it. But I went to Craddock and I asked Mr. Craddock if he would hire me. And he said, well, I can't. You're too young. Did you wait till you're 21? But he says, why don't you go in the Army and get that over with? And he said, go from the Army. He said, I will get you a job when you get out of the Army. And I said, you mean that? He said, absolutely. He did. He did. So I went in the Army. Now, what does the Army got to do with my career on the railroad? Well, it's like anything else. Yes.
I hate to interrupt, but we had a couple comments. Your light's pretty bright. We can't see your face.
Yeah.
So if you could,
How's
there you
that?
go. A little bit, only a little better.
Yeah, well, it's the computer. I know I can see it myself. It's too bright. But, let me see if I can get it. Can I get the I don't know what's shot. It's the computer itself is what's doing.
Oh, okay.
It's very bright. The computer itself is screen. I don't know how I can get it to go down anymore.
All right. Well,
No, I'm afraid of fooling around with this thing out there. I'm gonna lose you.
that's okay. I just continue then.
Okay, I don't know if I can sit back. How's that?
That's perfect.
Okay, I'll sit back. Well, I just want to let everybody know who I am. I'm not just a rail fan. I made the railroad my career. And as I say, I joined the Army because Mr. Craddock thought I should. So I joined the Army and naturally I asked the Army to get me transportation corps, which I knew was important to Virginia. Well, it happened. I got that. I joined the Army. That means I got 3 years and I ended up in Fort Eustis, Virginia. But here's part of the story. I got to into Fort Eustis, and they looked at me as a snot-nosed kid. That's what I was. I was only 8. So I said, I want to be an engineer. And they said, well, no, you're too young. You don't know anything about a railroad. That kind of course, that's Fort Eustis. That's Fort Eustis. That's another story altogether. But what I'm getting at is that I ended up in Fort Eustis and I took military training as a diesel electric locomotive electrician. Now that's pretty good. At least I'm on the railroad in the Army. I asked a couple of times. I said I knew C Company, which is the operating company of the 724th in Busan, Korea. And I asked the First Sergeant Fresnel, his name was. I asked him if I could be an engineer. And of course, he said to me, you're just a snot-nosed kid. What do you know about a train or a locomotive or anything? I spent quite a few hours up there talking to him because they were really short of engineers. I mean, that's how bad. So he said to me, well, I want to send the road foreman ride with you tonight. We're going to go out tonight with the road foreman. This is what you know. If you're lying to me, he says, I'm going to kick your ass. And I said, well, yeah, okay. So I said, I'm not worried about that. So, and I wasn't. Because these engineers that I knew back in the Lackawanna, back anywhere, have taught me things. I used to listen to them. I used to fire steamroll on the Pennsylvania when I was a kid. On the Lackawanna, I did. But what I'm getting at now, I'm in the Army. So I go ride with this sergeant who was road foreman on the Korean National Railroad out of Busan to Daegu. And we had 5, as I remember, it was 5 SW8s en route. And we went up to Daegu, and of course, the sergeant was asking me, what's this? What's that? What does it do? What is it this? What is it that? And of course, he's let me sit in the seat to make the brake test. He wanted to know how much leakage we could have, and I, of course, we got to Daegu and stayed overnight. The next day, we go down with a Pacific type locomotive. He says to me, he said, if you're lying to me, he said, what's this? What's that? A reverser and all. He said, where do you use reverser when you're going along? I said, well, it's a couple of gear change. So he seemed very happy with what I'm doing. So when we went to Busan, the commander, he went to the company commander and he said, this kid knows more about the locomotive than I do. I said, I didn't understand that, but that's what he said. So I ended up as a locomotive engineer in the 724th PRO in Busan, Korea, 18 years old. The youngest engineer in the military railway. I did that for 17 more months and transferred back to the United States. Now that's where I'm going to stop for a couple of seconds. Don't mind my voice. My voice is, I've had a doggone cold for the last 2 weeks. It's 80 degrees here in San Antonio. So what I'm getting at is, what do I have to do with Lackawanna? And what makes me, what makes me the opportunity to do what I'm doing tonight? All I have now left of my life is memories. Lots and lots of wonderful memories of an industry that I love even today. I've been given more rights, more ideas of what to do in life from the different railroads I worked. No, I wasn't strictly a Lackawanna or Erie Lackawanna person. Number one, I did not want to work for Conrail. I did not want to work for Conrail because that was Penn Central people. I went from the Erie Lackawanna to the Jersey Central. I got the job on the Jersey Central as a general road foreman. I was over the road over there. I spent 3 great years in the Jersey Central. Don Nelson, who was the guy who hired me, he was a superintendent. And I had a wonderful time with those people. It was learning. I knew the CNJ somewhat. I didn't know the people. I ended up working with a partner. His name was John Capita. He was the chief train master, and I worked with him. Between the Lackawanna and the CNJ, now, being a rail, yes, being a rail fan, I knew the railroad could be. I used to ride it when I was a kid. Ride the train from Jersey Central. I knew a lot of the engineers. I knew a lot of the firemen, the brakemen, conductors. So when I went to the CNJ, of course, a lot of them knew me from the New York. Coming over to the CNJ was a little part of life of me. Now, the first job I ever had on the Lackawanna, Mr. Craddock did hire me when I came out of the Army. I don't mean to be bouncing around, but I stopped doing that. Mr. Craddock hired me in Hoboken right after I got out of the Army in the 1955 era. And he hired me as a towerman. I was not a fireman because they weren't hiring firemen in October for many years because of the pensions. All he said, "Will you go anywhere?" And I said, "Yes, I'll go anywhere," because I was married. I don't know about it well. So they weren't hiring in Hoboken, Scranton, or Buffalo firemen. They did hire me. A guy by the name of Morris Carroll was the chief dispatcher. They hired me as a towerman, and I worked the first job was I worked as a Montclair, with the man. That was the first job I had on Lackawanna and Western for pay. I lasted until I went to Roosevelt Avenue, Walter Cooley. I went to Orange, New Jersey, which was Norman Ready. A lot of people probably know of that. From Norman, I went to Charlie Sherm in Newark, where I held Newark, and I got a call from the road foreman. Get a load of this. His name was Struggling in Hoboken. He called me and said, "Come down here and report for your job as a fireman." I said, "I can't. I'm locked up here in Newark because Charlie Sherm has had a heart attack. There's nobody else covered for him." So I had to. Struggling says, "I guess you don't want that job." I said, "Yes, I do want the job." And I said, "Mr. Craddock promised me that job, and he meant it." So I had to work as a towerman until Charlie came back from the hospital, back to work, and then that released me to go to Hoboken as a fireman. That's how I started my career as a locomotive man, which I always wanted to be. I knew all these people. I mean, I knew the engineers and the firemen. Of course, a lot of them retired by the time I got there. But I took the job. as a fireman, I fired for a lot of these people that knew of me or knew me. Without going, I mean, yes, I had a lot to do with Port Morris. I worked out of Port Morris as a fireman and an engineer. I worked out of Vulcan. I worked all the different areas around there as a local fireman and engineer. And would you know it? About 1960, I got promoted to a locomotive engineer. I went from there. I got promoted 2 years later as a road foreman engineer. My first job was Meadville, Pennsylvania, where I got transferred. Never did I ever think I would come back. I don't know if you guys knew the road foreman there, but Jim Lyons and Bill O'Donnell. The two road I more or less worked. I worked with John Reese, another one. But Jimmy Lyons hired me really as a fireman. And then I come back from Meadville as his boss because I took the move. So Jimmy and I were partners. With Frank Flynn, I worked with Frank Flynn, train master, and train master. And of course, I had an office in Dover. And I lived in Long Valley. I think people probably know. I came back from, I moved, instead of Mud Lake, I moved down to Valley. And I stayed in Long Valley as long as I worked on the CNJ. It's a wonderful place. I love living in a beautiful part of the world. And of course, Jersey Central was amazing. Now, something happened to me which I don't think many of you believe this. When I left the area of Lackawanna to go to the CNJ, I found out through the Constitution of the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers that I could keep my seniority on the Jersey Central. I could keep my seniority on the Erie Lackawanna as an engineer in case I wanted to come back. I could do it as long as both divisions, the Erie side and the Lackawanna side, voted for me. If one person in the group refused to vote for me, I never would have got it. I won. I got, nobody voted against me. I think it's the first time that that's ever happened with the PFLE. Of course, we had to belong to a union because we worked on I worked on the Erie Lackawanna or Lackawanna as a engineer. We had to belong to a union at the time. So I got the job as a road foreman, general road foreman on the CNJ. Because this is another one that nobody will believe. Now, I think most of you remember the train ES99, SE98. You remember those trains that ran via the Jersey Central, came out of Chester Junction, and went west to Scranton. Well, the Erie Lackawanna didn't have anybody to really constitute our crews. Well, I mean, Jersey Central on the Lackawanna. Well, Gordon Fuller, who was my boss, letter to the Erie Lackawanna saying, would it be okay if Mike Wikman would qualify his people on the Lackawanna? And they wrote a letter. I'm looking at the letter right now. It's on my wall right here. I can see where it said, I have permission from the general superintendent. His name was Wogan. Wogan gave me permission to qualify NJ crews on the Lackawanna. Whoever heard of this? Whoever heard of this? But yeah, I bounced back to Lackawanna. I used to go to the meetings between the CNJ and the Lackawanna. I did all the meeting of the superintendents, assistant superintendents over at Lackawanna. So I came back to haunt them the other way. But this is a wonderful career. It was a wonderful career, but as far as working for the railroad, well, this is 1976 now. 1976. And I decided at that time that I'm not going to work on rail. Well, I did work one day. I got a paycheck from Conrail. I went on my own after that. So Gordon Fuller told us, officers of the NJ, that if we didn't want to work for this Conrail, him. So I did. I came to him and I said, no, I don't want to work. I want to go to Texas. I said, yeah. I said, I'll go to Texas. There was a job open on the Missouri Pacific Red River Division right here in Texas, about maybe 150 miles from where I live right now. I was the road foreman of engines for the Missouri Pacific. And my territory was Montana, Palestine, into Missouri Pacific. So I worked there for a short time, very short time. I got a call from a friend, Dick Fahey. I think some of you people probably might know Dick Fahey. He was an engineer at Erie, out of Fort Jervis. I fired. Dick and I have been good friends through the years. Dick called me and he said, if you don't want to work for the mop down there, he said, why don't you come to work for Amtrak? Well, I did. I came to work for Amtrak. So I left. Yeah, any problem? I just see you showed up on something wrong. Okay, I got to work with Amtrak. That was another adventure for 13 years. I started out as a supervisor of locomotive operating procedures. I was kind of the what they called me the diesel doctor. I traveled all over the system. I mean, I was running trains in the Northeast Corridor. Can you believe this? I was running GG1s out of New York on strike switch. Now, I know what you're thinking when you hear strikes. This was not a strike switch. It's when the Conrail engineers would go back to Conrail and leave the Amtrak with nobody. I got a call one day from my vice president to get my ass over to Penn Station, New York, Harry Spain's office. I didn't know what I was going there for. So I flew into New York, went to Harry's office. And Harry said, go downstairs on track 17. You got a train going to Washington. I said, me? I'm only qualified to Rahway, Union Junction, Rahway. I can run trains between Penn Station, New York. Because anybody ever heard of Francis Meany? He was the rules examiner for the Pennsylvania Railroad in New York. So Francis Meany and I were old friends. I qualified with him in Union Junction, Rahway, because my responsibility was Harrison to
Hey, Mike, we're having a little trouble hearing you. Can you actually move a little closer to the computer? I think the microphone's not picking up your voice.
How's this? Any better?
Yep.
I wish I could do something. Well, let me see what I can do about this. If I could only cut down on that. I'll do it.
I think if you turn the lights on in the room, it'll be better.
What's that?
I can hear you.
How's that? Any better?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, look, I'm still at the Pennsylvania, and I was running trains between as an engineer, because the Conrail engineers went back to Conrail and left Amtrak with nobody to run trains. So it was being a train master. I ran my first train on the Northeast Corridor with a GG1, a power car and fleet cars down to Washington. Now, I think about this today, and I could have been in jail. I mean, I didn't know this back in those days where I was told to do what I was told to do. What am I going to do? Say, no, I'm not going to go. So they knew I was qualified, but yeah, to Rahway. But I got qualified all the way into Washington eventually, but a round trip before I did. So I did that quite a bit of times where there were short of engineers out there in the Northeast corridor. People going back, they would call for me to come out. So I did a lot of special work. My job later on Amtrak was something I always wanted to do all my life. I wanted to now, I've been an engineer. I was happy for that. I was a road. I was very happy about that. But there's always something I wanted to do. I wanted to teach locomotives. I wanted to teach engineers. So I got into HRD, and I was second in command as far as the instructors go, locomotive engineers in Wilmington, Delaware. And I worked for Steve Cavalier. I worked for a couple of guys down in Wilmington. And I ended up getting the whole thing. I ended up between Wilmington, Chicago, and Los Angeles, training engineers, which I love. I love doing that kind of work. But yet, I missed riding. I missed running trains. Well, how I got to Texas here, I told you I already went to the Missouri Pacific, but I went from there. I got moved to Chicago. I lived in Chicago quite a few years until the time came where I was transferred from Chicago to New Orleans to open a crew base. They wanted me to go into transportation. I did not want to go into transportation because I like my training business. But yet they needed people. They had nobody really to open a crew base in New Orleans. So they sent me there. New Orleans is one of the worst places I ever lived. I wanted to get out of there, something bad. So, make a long story short, they transferred me to San Antonio, where I have been for 36 years. When I came to San Antonio as a transportation manager one, what that title is more or less a train master. I never liked it. I never wanted to be a train master, never. Train masters change after box cars. I'm not a box car. Never have. I love my locomotive work, working with them, training, meeting I met the best people in the world, our engineers. All that job with Amtrak, it was a system job. I mean, when I first went on Amtrak the first 7 years, I lived in sleeping cars, dining cars, locomotive cabs. I lived on them. I mean, the whole train. I mean, Chicago to LA. Well, I built a training car for Amtrak. I didn't build it. Pro did. I wanted a training car that I could take with me all over the country, which I love to do that. And I did that. And we built a training car when Mr. Slater was the boss at the time. And we built this thing in Beech Grove. It ran us almost $300,000. It was a lot of money, but we took a dining car and we stripped it, made a training car on it. I used to use that for training all over the country. I mean, I'd be away 30 days at a time. I used to take my wife with me once in a while. I built a sleeping room and two roomettes at the rear end of the car. We had a kitchen and a place for training and register books and things. So I traveled all over the United States. I mean, Montreal, Quebec 1 week to the next time I'm down in San Diego. Wonderful. I really loved it. I think if Sam Calciotti's listening, I think he is. He called me right before I got on this tonight. He has all my slides. Of course, I have copies of them here, but I can't use those. They belong to him. But what I'm going to use tonight, I'm going to try to show you some of the pictures I took on the New Jersey cutoff on the last train that ran on in '78. But I know Sam knows what I'm talking about. The slides I took all over the United States from the cab of an F-40 to I'm a station freak. I love pictures of stations. And I think I have every station that in fact ever topped that. Now, don't forget now, it's night and day. Some trains are 12 hours late, then heck, I can get pictures I never got before. I used to travel on the locomotive with on-the-job training, and I would train engineers as we go along. I mean, I wouldn't talk to the engineer. I'd always move him over to the fireman side and talk to the fireman, or when he was acting as a assistant engineer. I'd travel all over with these people. We had classroom training. I used to rent motel rooms. Then I got the training car, where I could use the training car and a locomotive and take it all over the country. I tell you, that was one of the greatest parts of my life. I loved it. It was my poor wife. I was never home. I didn't bring up my kids. Once in a while, I go see them. Today, I've only got 2 girls, and I got granddaughter. I got granddaughter right up here, lives up 40 miles west of me. It was a great daughter. So I've got about 5 great grandchildren and granddaughters and things like that. But I tell you, life has been wonderful. Amtrak did not end my career. From Amtrak, I retired. I took an early retirement from Amtrak. I don't mean, I'm not going to sit here and say bad things about my employer, but toward the end of time, I think all of you know what the word politics means. I think all of you know this. Well, I walked into that word politics. And politics almost destroyed me. But of course, that's what living with politics is. That's one reason I left Amtrak like I did. I left Amtrak. I didn't really want to leave, but I went. The thing is, I went from the frying pan into the fire, if you know what I mean. I left Amtrak, which was a nice job. You knew where paycheck was coming in and all that kind of good stuff. I decided to form a company of my own, Wikman Railroad Consulting Service. I should have done it 20 years earlier, because I had a ball at that time. I mean, a rail fan's paradise. I mean, I would be hired by these Class 3 railroads to do training. To hire people. They would let me do the hiring, train these different guys in the engines. I can mention the name. I met a guy. His name is Gilbert Gillette. He was a vice president of operations of the food line. A wonderful man. I mean, one guy is the only pastor away from one time. Wonderful man. He owned 3 railroads. He owned the Wichita, Tillman, and Jackson. He owned the Nebraska Central and the Idaho Northern Pacific. I started all 3 of these railroads. He hired me, and I would train people, get people going, and then we would turn it into what they call day 1 when we took over the railroad. Idaho Northern Pacific is not very much left. Of course, Gilbert's retired today, living up in Emmett, Idaho, or Caldwell, Idaho. He started me on my career as a railroad consultant. Now, that to me, I got into more things with that. I got into representing people, lawyers, in courts of law. Accidents or things happening. I got a lot of law work where I'd be an expert witness. And it was one of the greatest challenges I ever had in my life. It was the challenge of an accident where maybe millions of dollars or maybe a life involved, where the lawyer would call me. He would tell me what he's got. Ask me, do I have case? And of course, he would let me be the guy to make the judge. I would judge whether. I'd say, well, what you just told me. I said, well, okay, but I had to work on both sides. I couldn't work for just the railroad. Sometimes I had to work for the plaintiff. But that was part of being a consultant. You could not just represent the railroad. And to sometimes represent somebody against the railroad. I don't like that, but still, whoever pays me, I do the best job I can. I got a lot of law work. The nicest part of the whole job was able to train people I didn't even know at the time. Of course, I didn't know a lot of them. Amtrak, I just had a classroom full of people. Well, but learning how to teach and how to find people who could do my job. I was asked to find 2 more people like me. Well, I was asked that on the CNJ. Does any of you people in the audience remember a guy named Boncher, Steve Boncher? At the time he was with the CNJ. Well, Steve Boncher was, I kind of helped him through it. I mentioned another name, Sam Calciati. I've known Sam since he was a kid. I've watched him grow up in his career. Hey, if I still worked there, he would have been my boss. I mean, these are all names that you guys in New Jersey probably know who I'm talking about. But I'm just using Steve Boncher as one. Of course, poor Steve, he died of cancer, but I talk to his wife even today. I get a Christmas card every year from him. These are wonderful, wonderful memories of people that I've come through on a job of making railroad men. I'm so happy that I had the opportunity to do this. I got another young man right here in town. Well, he lives south of me, about 80 miles. Tyler Young. He's another guy. Called me up one day, said, I want to be an engineer. He said, that's all. He called me because he saw me on the internet. So I took care of him. I've known him for about 15 years now. I got a job on the Union Pacific. And of course, things didn't work out very well there. But he's now in the oil field industry. Very good man. And Tyler and I keep in touch with each other quite often. So it's really wonderful. And another kid, a young boy that I hired from California Northern. Another job I got was to form that railroad. I went out there to California Northern and I hired a fellow by the name of John Koresh. I was to educate him to make him an engineer, which I did for the California Northern. And after I left, John moved up, he got to be the boss. And of course, today he's with the Marin County Transportation Group on that diesel DMU car between Petaluma and Sausalito, California. He's now the boss. So I'm kind of proud of these guys. I'm proud of Sam and I mean how they've gone up. And I feel maybe I had something to do with what they turned out to be. But that made memories for me. As I told, and by the way, I talked to John Koresh at least once a month. He calls me, or I'll call him. But it's a wonderful, wonderful memory that I've got with all these people here. Now, I'd like to get to some slides. I mean, I don't want to make a slide program out of this because anybody can look at pictures. But I got some slides I think you might be interested in. I know all of you in here, all of you who are listening to me, you know who Chuck Walsh is. I'm pretty sure you do know him. He's
actually presented for us before.
Yeah, he did the cutoff, all those. Yep. And the cutoff is near and dear to me because I rode a steam locomotive over the cutoff at 103 miles an hour with one of the 1150s. Anybody remember the Hudsons on the Lackawanna? Well, the New Jersey cutoff was where I worked. I worked out of Fort Morris. Of course, not when I was going 103 miles an hour. No, I was a kid. I was just 12, 13 years old. I used to go to Scranton because my grandfather had a hospital up there where I could stay overnight. I used to ride the steam engines up to Scranton with the Scranton engineers, Ambrose Coughlin, and it's just wonderful memories. Riding across the cutoff with a 1600 class going 70, 80, 90 mile an hour. I mean, especially the 1150 series. I'd bring the Scranton book to my grandfather's hospital, and the crews would take me there, leave me off, and I'd have a hospital room for the night. And then come down the next day on number 2 with Dick Hickey or Bobby Masters. And back to Hoboken. Back to Hoboken. I used to get off at Summit by the MU into Maplewood. Of course, this is my life as a child until I found out what girls that. But it was a wonderful life. It was a life of a rail fan for me. I love doing what I'm doing. I love to run trains. I really miss today at my age today, but if I could do what I've done before. Let me go find some of those slides. And
Mike, you actually have to just share your screen again before you do it.
Okay. And go over here to this. Yeah.
There you go.
That's it?
Yep. Yeah. Now you can bring up your slides.
Yeah. How did I get to that? Okay. I don't want to knock us out because I'm afraid of doing it.
No,
One. I don't know how to do this. I gotta find, like I did earlier this afternoon.
yeah, the top right, that little line to the left of the X. Hit that.
Right here. Oh,
One
yeah.
left. Yep. Hit that.
Okay. Now now we got it. Let me find. Yeah, this is where I stored all my slides and digitals that I've been taking through the years. I got them all stored in a 3 terabyte. Here. Okay. No, Mike Pavicchio wanted me to show these to my okay. I don't know if I'm going to do it in the right order. Let me see what I can do. These are show you some of the Erie Lackawanna. I want to go to those, especially the ones in. I'll show you a picture. This is a picture of me. Can you see this?
Yep.
This is a picture of my first job as a road foreman of engines in Meadville, Pennsylvania. This is my assistant superintendent. This is my train master, John Wolf, who was an M&E man. He was an M&E conductor. He was an M&E train master. And John and I were partners out there at Meadville. We were equal. We were not. He wasn't my boss, and I wasn't his boss. But what I'm getting at is we worked together. And these are some of the employees. This is the girl I hired, Miss Safety. But I talked to her, by the way, about maybe a year ago, and she is in her 70s. Can you believe this? I talked to her. Her husband died. Her husband was a conductor. I hired her right from high school as a stenographer, court stenographer. This is Harold Farley. He was the assistant superintendent of the Red River of the division we were on. So this is my train master. He's the general yard master in Meadville. These are these are pictures that bring back memories, and I think they might bring back some memories for you too. Anybody remember this one? Anybody remember that picture? Well, I was still around. That's right there at Milburn. Right there at Milburn. It's quite a story, but I'm not going to get into the stories about. I do want to get some stories when I find these last trips. I want to bounce around if you don't mind. I have to. I don't. Here we go. This is the day when this is the last train on the New Jersey cutoff. This is the last train that we read. It's an Amtrak F40. The engineer on this F40 was a guy by the name of Jim Lyons, the guy that hired me. He was my partner when I worked on the Erie Lackawanna. Now I'm with Amtrak now. They told me to ride this train. I had no idea where it was even going. All they told me to do is be in Philadelphia before 8 o'clock. And I didn't know where I was going to go. When I got there from Chicago, they told me that you're going to Hoboken. I said, Hoboken? Good Lord, I said, well, we went to Hoboken. Picked up Jimmy Lyons, Mr. Downing, R.L. Downing. Anybody here know Bill Shepard? Well, Bill Shepard was with me. And we were, of course, at this time, we're talking of Conrail. Here we came across, we had to turn the train, so we turned the locomotive right there on the Y. And we're coming out here, and we're going to head down the New Jersey cutoff. There's Lunch Bag Hill right here. I saw all my lunch bags up there when I worked food jobs or whatever. Let me go to the next one. This is as we were turning the train. This is Port Morris Start Office. There's a Conrail truck. These two gentlemen here were both employees of the Erie Lackawanna when I worked in Port Morris. Quite a story about this Start Office, but I don't think I have time for that. I love to tell stories because I got an awful lot of them. But this is turn the train. We're coming in, and we're going to turn the train around the Y, and we're going to go west on the cutoff. Let me. Remember this? This is UN Tower, Port Morris. Gosh, I never worked that tower, but I sure was a qualified man up here. This is what Port Morris looked like at the time. Of course, up the other end, turning around, the rails are missing right here. That's why we had to turn the train where we did. Didn't have any rails. Let me get it right here. There it is, right there. The rail's missing. We couldn't just come up the railroad and simply zap down the track. Couldn't do it because they took the rails. We had to go into the yard, turn the train, and come out here up to Westport Morris. And we had to leave out toward Greenville. I'm going to get some shots of Greenville. Westport Morris. I was going to line all this up. Look over here, rail fan. This is Greenville. Miserable day. I remember it was a cold, miserable day. This is the train we ran. And Jimmy Lyons and I were up this Greendale siding, Greendale station. Lord, you wouldn't believe the place today. It's gone today. The whole thing's abandoned. Let's see. Bounce around a little bit. I have to bounce. I always knew this as the Haynesburg Viaduct, but of course it's called the Collins Kill. This is what left of it today. You can see the rails were rusted, solid rust. We had no signals, no nothing. We just had the railroad. Going across the Collins Kill Viaduct at we're only doing about 25, 30 mile an hour the whole way, but it's very enjoyable. You know what I mean? We were the last. We were the last there. Like, bounce a little. Here's Greendale. You can see the signals are even missing. There it is right there. By the way, the rails were spiked. Boy, it was a miserable day. Slowly working my way west. Everybody knows what this is. What is this? Say it to yourself. Where is this? This is the 40-mile-an-hour curve in the Delaware Water Gap. This is where those cars ran away. Cement cars ran away and they flipped over in this area right here. There's been a number of wrecks in this 40-mile-an-hour curve right here. In fact, I have a little story to tell about this, and I'll show you a photograph of it, of the wreck of the Jersey Central ES 99 that happened right here at Point of Gap Curve. I was a general road foreman for the CNJ riding with my crews. One of the crews I was going to qualify, Tommy Gimber, was he's long retired. They went across this. I went across with the train with Gimber, right across in this area here, and the locomotive lurched to the right side and back. And I said to the engineer, I said, "My God, this is awful. This track work. I don't even want to go 40 over this." Well, it wasn't this. It wasn't this. It wasn't like this at that time. Of course, it was an active railroad. This is not an active. Of course, the Delaware and Lackawanna runs it today, but it's owned by the city or the state of Pennsylvania today. We are in Pennsylvania. So we had a hell of a wreck right here. If you would bear with me, I might be able to show you a shot of what this wreck looked like. I have to get off the Lackawanna side for a minute. So let me go look at something here, and I'll show you. You'll never believe. But, by the way, this is the first time that I've ever shown hate to do this because I was going to do a lot of different things. I thought I would just wait. I can I want to show you a picture. I don't think anybody's ever. There's a CNJ wreck and a Lockwood board right near Long Valley. This was a Christmas, I believe it was. I think it was 72. I'm not sure. George Mylander took the picture of the Norfolk and West F-class tipped over. We used to have a wreck every week on the branch up there, High Bridge branch. That's a picture right there. I want to show you. I want to show you the wreck. I'm sure I have it. If I can't find it, I like rather than Amtrak, I want to do something else. He knows the difference between the Delaware and Lackawanna Railroad and the. Now we're back. I'm going back to the pictures. Okay, this is at East Stroudsburg. This is the day, the last train over the cutoff. We're sitting in Stroudsburg now. A bunch of rail fans over on the other side here. Maybe you'll notice some of these, who they are. But Jimmy's up in the cab of the locomotive. I got off and took the picture. I was hoping Irwin Flynn would show up. He didn't. Of course, I didn't tell him. I didn't even know where I was going until I got to Philadelphia. But that's what the Amtrak special looked like in 1978. Let me show you something here. Got some wonderful engineer pictures of different engineers I worked with. Warren Lewis, engineer that kind of brought me up, kind of taught me a lot. We used to call him the Iron Major. He was a major. He was a major in the Marines, but he acted like it all of his life. He is my partner. I work with. Oh, his pictures are too small. Now, anybody recognize this place on the cutoff? How about Johnsonburg? There's the creamery. It used to be the creamery. The station, what's left of it. By the way, Chuck Walsh has, I think all of you seen what he did, all the different episodes he's made. Fascinating. They're absolutely fascinating. Let's keep going along here. Here's one of the wrecks at the Pointed Gap. This is one of the wrecks where the two cars went down and ran away from Port Morris all the way here, and they dumped over here. There's a Scranton hook. I think, I'm not sure what wreck this was. I think this was a CNJ, but I'm not sure. Let's see. And Slateford Viaduct. Right ahead of you is Pennsylvania, right over on the bend. And that's a Slateford Viaduct, which is around today. There's nothing on it today. Walsh is trying to get it. I believe Sam Calciati was the engineer on Conrail that had a lot to do with tearing the rail up. Well, Sam's probably cussing me out right now. No, he was on the train with a couple of the people I knew. It's a different shot of where's that? How many people know that's Stroudsburg? The old freight house, Stroudsburg. This right here, this area right here. Everybody remember the flood? Hurricane Diane? Picture of the station and the tower, and of course, they still had a tower here at one this was still Conrail for the Delaware Lackawanna. Still active in 78. Here's a picture. I don't know if any of you guys recognize anybody in that picture. I recognized a few of them. This is at Stroudsburg on that special train for the Amtrak. We're getting ready to head uphill. Antelope and up to Henryville, and I go along a little bit more. This is way up the top of the hill of Tobyhanna. I don't believe that's Tobyhanna. They are Elmhurst. Look, let's see. These are pictures that Irwin Flynn got me of the Delaware water taken from the air. All of you know who Irwin Flynn is. Picture right there, the Stateford. Now, does anybody remember what was slightly south of here? Another railroad bridge. What railroad bridge was that? I don't have a picture of it here. It's the Lehigh, New England. Remember that? And we're talking of Haynesburg. What was underneath the bridge at Haynesburg? The Paulins Kill Viaduct. What was that? What was under there? The Susquehanna and the Lehigh, New England. When I was a rail fan kid, as a fireman or an engineer, I used to get down and take pictures of it. Yeah. This is Blair's when it was a radio station on the last day going down. I had some wild stories about what we did there. The train master and I did there. Missing. Coming down the hill into Scranton. This is looking at the river. The railroad foul. There's the Naog Tunnel is right there. We're going to see a picture of the Naog Tunnel in a minute. But we're going down the hill. It's Naog Tunnel. Here an Amtrak locomotive going through it. Well, just think, maybe a couple of years from now, we will see an Amtrak locomotive going into the Naog Tunnel. We might see that. I think we will. I stay alive long enough, I can ride the train in the Scranton. That would be a crowning glory. Here we are. The old speed boards for the Lackawanna are still there. This is the old station that I used to hang around when I was a kid. I knew the superintendent when his name was Jones when I was a little kid. There's another story about that. I want to tell you about that story. Here's the place we used to get fooled, Harrison Avenue, Scranton. Coming in with a freight train, the signal was right around the bend right there. So when you had it, you came in on a yellow approach signal. You didn't know what you're going to end up with. You got a freight train behind you. We're on a 1.6% grade downhill. You had to really be careful here because you come around that bend and that signal is right there. If that's red and you can't stop the train, you know where you're going. This is a neat place. That was Harrison Avenue, Scranton. I got a better picture. This is how I remember Scranton when I was a kid. Scranton Tower. I used to walk down there because right down the other side of the hill there is the old Lackawanna and Wyoming Valley, the Laurel line. If you ever heard of it. The interurban line that used to run from Scranton to Wilkes-Barre. When I was a kid, my brother and I would ride it down to Rocky Glen. There was a park there where you had roller coaster rides and all kinds of stuff as kids. And this is Lackawanna Avenue, Scranton, right here. This is how I came in. Well, I'll tell you about that in a little bit. There's the tower. I used to walk down here and I used to ride the steam engines, the 080s, and switching passenger cars when I was a little kid, when I was 8, 9, 10 years old. I used to come down here and just watch. And the engineers used to let me ride the cab with them on those 080s. That would switch out the passenger car. Oh, those were the days. Those were the wonderful days. Let me see if I can get a better shot. I don't know if it shows this. Yeah. When I was a fireman and an engineer, but before I was an engineer, I used to fire out of Scranton. And this is where the freights we used to bring our locomotives up here and get this switch and go back down against the train and head for Hoboken. This was my territory when I was a fireman. I used to ride the different trains over the New Jersey cutoff. And then sometimes we would go by. You ever heard of a train called PH-12? PH-12 used to run via Portland and go down through Buttsville and Oxford. How many people know about what's up at Oxford? Remember the tunnel? The Oxford Tunnel? What's above the tunnel? Did you know there was a large ore mine up on top of the hill out of Oxford? I used to work the local with that engineer you just saw a picture of, Warren Lewis. He was running the Fairbanks Morse engines down the hill with cars going to, I'll think of the name of it. It's in right near Philadelphia. I'll think of the name of it. We used to get 4 cars, maybe twice a week, out of that mine up above Oxford. That's the old road, which today is abandoned. And we used to go through the Oxford Tunnel and the Monongahela Tunnel. I think I have pictures of both. I'm just trying to see what I've got. I got a picture. Well, it's a picture coming into Scranton, into Bridge 60 Yard, which is really the same today because it's now the Delaware and Lackawanna. Yeah, this is coming into Scranton. I get that one out. Here it is. Bridge 60, of course, you can't see the Bridge 60 tower. This is the Hyde Park Y. This is where we used to go. Some of the trains would go north, some would go down to Taylor on the old road. That's where we're heading right now. We're heading to Taylor. This is the F40, and we're going to head to Taylor. We're going to go over onto the Lehigh Valley. We end up going on the Reading and back to Philadelphia that day. So that was a long trip. It took all day to get there, but boy, it was a wonderful trip. I say it's the last trip of anything. I don't think that showed. How much time do I have?
Figure another 30 minutes.
Okay. Wonderful. I just want to show you something.
If it's not too much, Mike, we'd love to hear some stories about when you started up Tri-State.
Oh yes. Let's talk about that while we're Like we can always bounce the slides. That's nothing. Um, as a road foreman, I had the M&E division was more or less my responsibility with the engineers. And, and so I used to ride trains all the time. I put Jimmy in the office, let him handle the office work. And I would do training. When I got a chance, I would do the training. Jimmy didn't like to do the training. I did. But, okay. One of my favorite spots if I had some time on my hands, which I did once in a while, I wasn't that busy. I would stop at Madison. I think all of you remember who Tom Taber was. Tom Taber was at the time I knew him. He was the mayor of Madison. He was a president of the committee association. Everybody knew. Everybody. I mean, Mr. Shoemaker, the president of Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western, knew him personally. So Tom Taber was well known. And he was given the baggage room in Madison Station as an office. And he was making those. You remember the 3-volume books that he made on the Lackawanna? Gosh, I prized them. I have them here in my collection. And of course, I got them all signed by him because I used to go up there. If I had an hour or two, I had really nothing important to do. I'd stop at Madison, get off the train, and go over to his office. If the door was open, I knew he was there. So I would go in the office and we would just talk. He loved to talk about the railroad, so did I. And I used to help him do different pictures. He wanted to making these books. And I told him about an idea that I had. I said, here I am, a road foreman. I got to be careful. On the railroad, working for the railroad and being a rail fan is not something they look up to. I had to be really careful. You can see the slides I have. Well, I have only a few slides of the Lackawanna. Why? Because I couldn't carry a camera with me. I could do it on my off hours. When you're a road foreman, you don't have any off hours. There is no off. I used to work 7 days a week. Lots of time. What I'm getting at is I would stop at Tom Taber and we would talk. And I mentioned to him one time, a friend of mine, Ray Storey, who's Ray is equal with me in this. Because Ray and I by the way, Ray Storey's father was an engineer on the Lackawanna. Everybody knew Dick Storey. If you didn't know him, you sure would get to know him. Dick was a beautiful man, and his wife, of course, I was with the VFW in Netcon, and of course, got to know his. Well, to make a long story short, Ray and I talked one time about forming a group of rail. We both belong to the National Railway Historical Society, and we thought, think of his name. God, I get this old age hasn't helped. But he was the president of the National Railway Historical Society. He was a lawyer in Philadelphia. I can't think. He owned the Winchester and Western. I'll think of his name. But Ray and I decided we were going to go to Philadelphia to meet this guy. He was the president. By the way, if anybody wants to know exact dates and the names of the different people, Mike Delvecchio knows them all. I hope he gets out of that hospital. But Mike Delvecchio knows who I'm talking about. Well, between working with Tom Taber, so one day I said to him, we've gone to Philadelphia. Ray Storey and I went to Philadelphia to talk to, if I can think of it, but I'll think of it. We talked about forming a group here in Dover, New Jersey. Madison, we couldn't really have a meeting in the Madison, even though Tom Taber gave us his office in Madison was our first meeting. That was our first meeting. Now, exactly, I don't know exactly the date, but Mike does. But Ray Storey and I, a guy by the name of Hopper, I think there was about 8 or 10 of us there. But the guy came up from Philadelphia to give us the charter of the, we call it the tri-state. That was Ray and I came up with that idea on the tri-state because New York State is close by, Pennsylvania is close by, and New Jersey. We thought using the term tri-state would, get people from all over. And look where we are. And look where you guys are today. The largest chapter in the NRHS. I don't know if you still belong to the NRHS. I don't know. I don't belong. I bugged out because there's a reason why I don't pay my dues anymore. I left when I was down here. I worked at a museum here, a railroad museum right here in New Braunfels, Texas, which was the Blue Bonnet chapter. And they voted out. They voted the NRHS out. And of course, I got involved in that and tried to make it so we didn't lose them, but we did. So I dropped my membership from that time, but I think I had 55 years in it at the time. And I still belong to the Railway and Locomotive Historical Society. I'm 56 years in it now. I just talked to him twice. He's the president of it, and he lives down here in a little town called Fruitville, Texas. What we did was Tom Taber let us use his office for the first meeting that I only could think of his name. But, I know Mike Delvecchio knows all about it because I talked to him about it. And we met, then we met in Dover, in a church in Dover, because we couldn't fit enough people in that little office that Tom Taber had. And I think his name was Bob Rose. I don't remember. I don't know if you guys know him. But Bob Rose was pretty active in this, in the tri-state to begin with. And I understand he's living down in North Carolina right now. While we're talking about memories, about a man who had a lot to do, and you guys might know who I'm talking about. Anybody in the group know who Red Wilson was? I'm just going to give you a pause. Red Wilson was he worked for the highway or the road department in East Orange, Jersey. He lived there with his mother. Red was he wasn't retarded. He was just slow. But everybody on the railroad knew who Red Wilson was. He was the yard master. We used to call him the yard master at Washington. He used to come up every Friday and stay up there every Friday, Saturday night, and Sunday night. And the conductor, his name was George Hay, would take him back to East Orange every week. He would live in the station at Washington. And he used to line the switches up for us when we would come down with a P-burger or whatever. But when we would go out to Oxford, he would ride with us out there. Red was like, well, Mr. Craddock, the superintendent, knew Red very well because Red used to come to the office once in a while. So he was well known. Red Wilson. Well, what was fascinating for me is I was teaching on Amtrak in Raleigh, North Carolina. Now, everybody wondered whatever happened to Red Wilson. Everybody wondered. I mean, I can remember some of the crews asking me. Why they asked me, I don't know, because I was gone. I was on the Jersey Central. But yet, I'm in Raleigh, North Carolina, teaching a class of engineers on the seaboard about how to operate our equipment. And who walks by the window of the training car but Red Wilson? I hadn't seen him in, I'll bet you 20 years. But who could ever, you'd never know. You'd always know who we. I dropped what I was doing and ran outside, and I'm yelling, hey, Red, Red, Red. So he came over, and my gosh, give me a big hug. I haven't seen him in years. Well, to make a long story short, that's where Red Wilson ended up his career. He ended up with cancer, and he died of cancer in Raleigh, North Carolina. But I know a lot of the crews wanted to know whatever happened to him. I never found out why he went from East Orange, New Jersey down to Raleigh, North Carolina. I never found that out. But I did talk to him a few times there because he knew I was working for Amtrak, and if there was a special move he gave me, I knew where his phone. He had a telephone. I could find it. But his mother died. I know his mother died in East Orange down there. Well, getting back to the tri-state, we formed it. As I say, I wish I knew the exact date, but at this time I don't. But Tom Taber and Ray Storey and we actually put this place together because we went down to meet, whatever his name is, down in Philadelphia. And yeah, I had his name right on the end of my tongue. He was a lawyer, and he was a real neat guy, a real fan. He owned the Winchester and Western Railroad for a while there, but I understand he died a long, long time ago. But he was a lot older than Ray and I both. Ray Storey today is down there near Whiting. He's down some apartment down there. I talk to him once in a while. Talk to each other on the telephone, but I tried to get him to come up. I tried to get up there at the 50th anniversary. I wanted to be there to the dedication with Mike, but when you get to be as old as I am, you get different things. Like I ended up with a crazy thing called Meniere's disease, which you get a little dizzy, and they didn't want me flying in an airplane. I couldn't get up there. I'm kind of stuck down here. I had a friend that would drive up there about maybe 3 months ago. They had the Montclair dedication. I tried to get up there for that, and it was one thing after the other. This old age has got me. I really can't do all the things that I want to do, and I just want you all to know that how we formed it. How we formed the tri-state chapter, as I say, we had a lot of help from Tom Taber, and we had a lot of help from the NRHS that helped us get the tri-state together. And I've been really happy about what's happened. I was granted a membership of the tri-state chapter way back when they formed the block line. I think you still use the block line?
From time to time. We're hoping to get it going again.
And we had a guy by the name of Epstein. I'll never forget this guy from New York. Epstein was kind of an oddball, but what they call a foamer, you know what I mean. And he was one of them, but he started the block line, and I thought it was pretty nice what he did. I mean, he put some time into it. He was, don't forget, he was a nice kid, a nice guy, but he was a foamer, and he embarrassed me 1,000 times in Hoboken. I mean, he came up and I'm talking to the general superintendent, and he came up there and he put his hands around my eyes so I couldn't see who I'm talking to. And of course, the general superintendent said to me, "Who is that?" And what am I going to say? I said, "He's a rail fan." And you know him? Well, you see what I mean. Working on the railroad as an officer, railroad, a rail fan was not very well liked. So I had to kind of be careful what I did, especially with a camera. And I had to be very careful with that. So I didn't get the pictures of the Erie Lackawanna that I would have liked to have had. I had to buy a lot of things. I had to not act like a rail fan, whatever that means. But it was very difficult being interested in my job and yet be an officer of the railroad. You know what I mean? I don't know why they expected us to be different than the rest, but I don't know. All I know is being a rail fan through my life on the railroad as an officer has been a real problem with me. A real problem because, as I say, rail fans are not looked at to railroad management. Why? I don't really know, except there are some homers that cause. Downing used to say that you give a rail fan something, they'll steal everything that moves. And well, of course, he was involved in a builder like stolen from those Delaware and Hudson PA-20s that I got accused of taking. My office was at the round. My office, I could look out the windows of my office and see the PA-20 sitting there over on the garden track. And, you know, I saw them. I was there all the time with it. But somebody came along and stole all the builder's plates off. They were Morrison Knudsen plates. But I got accused of taking them. And, of course, my boss understood me. Of course, it took me a lot of time to convince him that I wasn't a phoner. But liking your job as on the railroad is a tough job to be an officer of it. So I kind of suffered for that for many years. But hey, but the career I had on the railroad was just utterly fabulous. As far as I'm concerned, I made out 100%. When I went in business for myself as a consultant, that was the best move I ever made. Look where I was. I was out in the California Northern, started that railroad. I started the INT in day one. I started the harbor lines out there in Fraser Island, in California. I was involved in a lot of startups, and it's been a lot of fun doing this kind of work. I just wish that I would have done it 20 years earlier. Because if you want to see some more slides, I'll be glad to look to show them to you, but I don't.
Sure, you just got to share your screen again.
Oh, okay. Oh, I get it. But I want to show you a picture that I took that's like these. Said, whatever you do, show the men this. Now, this is up in Port Morris. I don't remember the exact date, but it was, I would say maybe 1957, 58 in that area, I believe, because we merged with the Erie in 1960. And I was a fireman and the engineer on this train here. We're going from Port Morris. There's the empty hoppers. We're going down to Peaburg. And today, the snow up here, I believe it was something in the teens. It was really bone-chilling cold. And this is the pictures of this is an F7 painted the freight colors. Let's take a look at the second. Let's take a look at the other ones in the back. Look at this. Mr. Shoemaker, the president of the Delaware, Lackawanna, and Western, wanted to save some money. And by the way, today, I work I retired at 82. I'm 88 today, but when I worked for a small railroad down south called the Border Pacific, I used to run that railroad. I ran it for many years. And the owner of it is a lawyer. And I had to paint a locomotive we bought from where did we buy them from? I bought a locomotive and I had to have it painted. It cost me $12,000 just to paint the locomotive. But this is what Mr. Shoemaker's idea was to save money, is to make these gray bombers, we used to call them. Hideous, but you'll notice what it is. It's an FT. These FTs, by the way, the Lackawanna FTs were all hand bombers. What I mean by that is that you had to open the shutters manually. You had to start the fans up here manually. You had a clutch. You had a clutch at this end and a clutch at that end. And a clutch at this end and a clutch at that end. And you had to open the shutters yourself. So a fireman's job was really a busy job with these FTs. Wait, another shot of them looking at the other angle. I know that locomotive there, the 651, was only geared for 52 miles per hour. And it was in the timetable where if you use this locomotive, that's as fast as you could go with that 651 was 52 miles per hour. That's it. These were low geared, but they were strong. Were usually used in push service. This locomotive, this one right here, was used out of Scranton. So once in a while, we would get a Scranton unit in here into Port Morris. There's one of the hopper cars with the name Lackawanna written across it. But let me show you something else here. I wish I could find that CNJ. I think, does everybody remember these? Train masters. Stories about this. When I was a fireman, they had a boiler on these in 6800s, the 800, the 850, and the 859 had boilers on them. Big 4740 boiler on the back end here. So we used them in passenger service. There's the train right there. You could use these in passenger service. And we used them at the Branchville. And these were a good locomotive. They really were. We used to run the freight trains with sometimes 3, 4, or 5 of these going over to Scranton. They were a darn good engine, except the transition. I don't want to get the story about that, but there's a story about the locomotives, about how they made transition. But I tell you about how I suffered with them. Trying to look, see what I can see here that might be of interest. Of course, my favorite cars was let me get a bigger. My favorite cars were the MU cars. I don't have that many pictures of them, as much as I would have liked to. Because it's a small picture. Oh, by the way, speaking of what I did for a living when I was a road foreman, the superintendent, because I lived in Long Valley, New Jersey, the superintendent gave me the Gladstone branch. That was my responsibility totally. If anything happened on that branch, I better have the answer. But they gave that to me. They figured I didn't have enough to do, I guess, because I'll tell you one thing about being an officer on the railroad. You can't ever say you got nothing to do. There is no such a thing as saying that, because you go 24/7. I don't know how I ever made it to 82 or 88. I mean, I don't know how I made it this far, because the stress working out of Hoboken was almost as much as a person can stand. But the MU cars to me were the backbone. I love those old cars. I used to run them. Here's a good picture of it. I haven't gotten big pictures to show you. I wonder if anybody knows where this is. Anybody know where that is? Ever heard of Nichols, Pennsylvania? That's right there on the cutoff, the Pennsylvania cutoff. I wonder how many people know there was 2 cutoffs. It's not just in New Jersey, it's up here, the Milford cutoff. Looking at this Nicholson viaduct, the reason I have a lot of love to it. My mother was born just on the other side of it. That's where I put her ashes. I went up on top here in the wind and opened up her ashes and put her ashes all over where she was born. My uncle used to work on this in 1911 when they started building the cutoff up there. He had a lot to do with pouring the cement, the Milford cutoff. Oh, I heard you all talking about the U-34C8. This is one of the first ones I was running in Dover, getting ready to go to Hoboken because I didn't have an engineer. I had to run the damn thing myself with my wife with me. Didn't have an engineer. And this is a brand new U-34C8. We forgot. Kind of. That's on the Erie Lackawanna. Okay, let me go to the Erie Lackawanna. Now, this is all the Erie Lackawanna. So we might have that. How many remember that picture? Where it is? Dover. Get the boot out of here. Remember the job? You used to get on a boat, switch out the EF through down there for. Yeah. These, I grew up with these U-34C8s. I went to school up at General Electric for these engines. These engines right here were nothing more than a U-36 with a head-end power generator. These were one of the first successful. They were successful. When we first got them, I think it was in '69 is when we first. I'm not sure, but I remember we did it overnight. Jimmy stayed on the Dover side. I went over to Suffolk, and I had an adventure you'll never believe that happened over there. That I don't know too many people that know the story. The first day of the U-34CHs over in Suffern, it was a day about maybe 33 degrees. It wasn't freezing, but yet it wasn't. Okay. Does everybody understand what kind of a brake shoe is on these locomotives and cars? It's not metal. It's not metal. They're not metal brake shoes. So they're called composition shoes, made of a plastic. Okay. I just want you to understand what I'm saying, what happened the first day, and how the snow brake was developed. I developed the snow brake, and it went to the MTA. The MTA got the patent for it. I went to the Long Island Railroad, and I know the road foreman and superintendents over there because I worked with those guys after a while. I worked for the MTA before I left. When I left the CNJ, I went to work for the MTA in New York with John Drake. He was my boss on the Erie Lackawanna. When he left the Erie and went to New York as in the MTA, and he hired me. When I left the CNJ, my first job out of there was working for the MTA. Now, this is a U-34C8. This is the locomotive we had out of Suffern, not the exact number. But we left Suffern on time. I think everybody knows where Ramsey is. That's the next station stop. I was running the cab car. I was back in the cab car back, I think it was something like 6 or 8 cars. I'm not sure. I put the brake on. Danny Symington was the engineer, but he wanted me to run the first trip because they all felt they want to see what goes on. Well, I put the brake on coming into Ramsey. And I put it on. And I put it on, and I put it on, and I put it on. I went to emergency. Oh, good. The brakes just, I went through Ramsey like I never even tried to stop it. People were waiting to get on the train. And here we were terrassing through there, and I couldn't stop. So as I say, I put it in emergency. By the way, we made the brake test up in Suffolk. We made the brake test, no leakage. Everything was fine. I wonder what, I just wish I was in your group right now. I wish I could ask one of you a question. What happened? Well, did you ever have your heart in your mouth? Well, my heart was in my mouth. I was chewing on it because I was scared to crap. I said, here I couldn't stop a train going into Ramsey. And I wondered what happened. Well, let me tell you something about those brake shoes, those composition brake shoes. By the way, on all these new cars that you have, of course, it's New Jersey Transit today. I'm not going to even mention them because I didn't work for them. I worked for the Erie Lackawanna at the time. And of course, it's the NJ. But what I'm getting at is the composition shoe picked up water at night. And when I was sitting in the yard up in Suffern, the brake shoes froze. The ice froze in the brake shoe. Now we made a release and a application. Yeah, the brakes work. Everything looked good. But by the way, you put a piece of ice against a wheel at a high speed, what are you going to get? Nothing. You're not going to get any braking ability, that's for sure, because I went through that station like, well, the only thing I did is I called the on the radio, the train dispatcher, and I think it was Bob Collins. I think everybody knows who Bob Collins was. I told Bob Collins about stopping all the trains, all U34CH trains. And I told every engineer, of course, Jimmy was on the out of Dover. I got the superintendent finally. I got on a payphone. I called the superintendent. I told him, we're going to stop all these trains and I'm going to ask the engineers to put a 10-pound application of the brakes and push the train with the brakes on. So we make these shoes hot where they melt the water out, which we did. So every train that day was late. Even engineers, we wrote a train order. They wanted me to write the train order. What am I going to say on the train order? Well, I told them. I told the chief dispatcher what to say on the train order. Stop all trains. Make a 10-pound application of your brakes and hold it until you see smoke. When you see smoke, then go a normal way. That saved the day. Well, what happened there? How did that get to Metro North? Well, Metro North had the same problems. And they were wondering why they couldn't stop trains. That's what the development of the snow brake is. That's why when we had weather like that was bad, say going from freezing to thawing or thawing to freezing, we would put the snow brakes on. That would hold 10 pounds in the brake cylinders of all the cars. So it would melt off all the water that's in the brakes of the brake shoes. Well, that's a story that I don't think anybody's ever heard, is how the snow brake was developed. All I know is the MTA got it made. And all of our cars that we got, the new cars, all have snow brakes on them. It's just a simple valve. You just set the valve and it just holds 10 pounds, almost like a retainer, but it works differently. That was a story that I'll never forget as long as I live. Going down the track and trying to stop a train. I'm just I want to see if I can find that picture of, oh yeah, here. You've probably never seen this. This is the training car I built, or I had built for the EL. We did this for the Erie Lackawanna too. Of course, the people who designed the equipment are people I just asked if they would do it. See, I was going to get this job. I was going to wander the whole Erie Lackawanna from Chicago to New York. I was going to wander this. And of course, this is the car that I had built. But of course, I didn't do all the engineering like I did with the Amtrak one. This is a 24 RL brake, which we used to have. And that's what it looks like. But I got a mess of, I want to show you a couple more. That's what it looked like. I say I didn't design it. I just told them what I wanted. And they built that in Hornell. And I understand, I think Sam Calciati told me that one of those cars still exists today. This is the old number 6 brake. The old number 6. I remember I had that car with all that equipment, really nice equipment. Boy, they did a beautiful job of building that for me.
Tri-State actually owns one of the air brake training cars. We own the old Erie 10.
Yes, yeah, I heard something. You have something like that? It's a Stillwell.
Yeah, it was originally a Stillwell.
Yeah.
And then it was
I remember
on
the Stillwell. I don't remember that, but I'm just trying to think. I got something I didn't know I had. I had that was another one. Kind of thing. Look at this, Scranton. Scranton almost up. That's like what it looks like today. It's a Radisson Hotel today. And to look at something. Wait a minute. No, that's not it. Oh yeah. What I'm looking for where we are at Oxford. Hey, NJ for I got so much to show you here. It's almost impossible to do everything. I'll tell you, working with Amtrak gave me more of an opportunity. Here's 3,443 photographs of Amtrak, but I've got a lot of stuff that's in here. Could be. I say I was given. Let me go to this one. I was given a opportunity by Amtrak. There's the first AEM 7, and I'm in Pueblo. I used to live in Pueblo. I thought I lived for a while because I was out here with this AEM 7 for almost a year. And you guys ever knew of Jerry O'Keefe? There he is right here. Jerry O'Keefe was in charge. I got him a job out at Pueblo where he was in charge of all the engineers out there. Here's one of them here, 2, 3. There's 3 of them right here. His boys. And I came out here. I'm taking the picture, so I brought the 900 out from Wilmington. And we put that on a passenger train. Took it all the way across the country. I slept up here. I had a bed right up in they made me a bed at Wilmington where I couldn't get back in the train because, I'm on the, and I had food up there. I had everything. But yet this locomotive, by the way, the 900, what happened to the 900. You know the engineer who was killed over there. His name was Evans. Down at Gunpowder, remember the Conrail came out and he hit this guy at 125 mile an hour. So this locomotive was demolished. I have pictures of it in pieces. But these are the people out of Pueblo. We were making the test runs out there. We made 226,000 miles. We ran this one. to find out all the problems of the other 46. And this locomotive was like my baby. I mean, I lived with it. You'll notice the red pantograph up there. That's the Bricknell Willis pantograph. There's the guy who brought it there from England. Roberts, a fine man, a fine man. These are all guys from Pueblo that I used to work with. That guy right there, he got a snake. He got a snake, one of those, a rattler snake, and he gutted the damn thing and he put a spring in it. And he rolls it up and puts it in my bag. And I got one of those bags, I carry my tools and stuff like that, or timetables or whatever. And I opened this doggone thing and this snake jumped out at me with a spring in it. And of course, I just about shit my pants, but that's another story. But I could tell you stories about all these guys. I mean, where's Gene Moy? Gene Moy was another guy that right here. You had to watch him too, another practical joker. Yeah, but this one, we used to call him the mouse. Look at him, he looks like. But this is a group at Pueblo, and what we did out there with that locomotive, you would not believe what we did. We ran that thing at 150 miles an hour, and we tested all kinds of. I just want to. Here it is. Here's the 900 in Baltimore. These are both electromotive delivering engineers. Schlesinger, his name is. This guy, what an unfortunate thing happened to him. He delivered the locomotive with me. He rode all the way across from EMD out to Wilmington, out at LaGrange, Illinois to Wilmington. He loved to go out fishing in the boat. So he got a couple of days off around here. We were in a motel right up here in Baltimore. And we were running between Wilmington and Baltimore. It's 900 it's brand new. The paint's still wet. Well, he went out fishing one weekend. He had a boat with a motor on it. He couldn't stop the boat and slammed into where you tie the boat up, and it broke his back. And he never walked again. I used to see him out at Electromotive in the office in a wheelchair. One of the nicest guys you want to meet. Schlesinger's a good guy too. But this is some of the crazy stuff that went on in Amtrak. Quite a story about this picture. I took this picture in a place called American River Canyon near Dunsmuir, California. There's a story what goes with this you would not believe. I say it because at my age and the way things are today, have I got time to just mention it?
Sure.
Okay, this train we're on right now is the daylight train coming from Seattle to Los Angeles. This is a picture of a superliner on fire. I have other pictures of the superliner. Okay, we stopped at Eugene, Oregon, and this married couple got on the train and on the sleeping car that I was on. Now, see, the Southern Pacific want to play games with us. This is what I mean about politics. The Southern Pacific would not let me ride a locomotive owned by Amtrak on their railroad without a special pass. That means I had to call Moffett or somebody in San Francisco and ask them permission to ride my train on their railroad. Well, I don't think you guys know me very well, but I don't go for that bullshit at all. And I refuse to ask their permission because it's my train on their railroad. Well, to make a long story short, I wanted to get on the train at Sacramento, and I was told to leave the cab or I would be arrested. And I told them, arrest me. That's what I want you to do. I want you to put me in jail because I'm refusing to get off this locomotive. It's my locomotive. Well, there's quite a long story with it got the top people. But this fire you see right here is the cause. What caused that fire is I had to break the train. I was in 2 cars ahead of this fire. Now, the people who got on it at Eugene, Oregon, they proved it. It started in bedroom E of that car where they were. Now, when we stopped in the American River Canyon, those 2 people jumped out of the car and ran away. They never were caught. And the train was on fire. The reason I didn't even know it. If it wasn't for Ruth Wong, she saved my life. I never knew you could be living in a car that's burning with the smoke. But when you're asleep, you breathe the smoke and you breathe until you die. Well, Ruth Wong knocked on my door and woke me up, and it felt like somebody grabbed me by the throat. I didn't know what was going on. All I did is I woke up and my room was full of smoke. So, make a long story short, which is quite a story here, this went into an investigation. I mean, 2 people died in this car right here. I had to cut the train because the conductor didn't have the common sense to do something like that. I had to grab his radio. And of course, I found out later on it was a Rule G. He was drunk. The conductor was drunk. I had to grab the radio and tell the engineer. Now, wait till you hear this. I told the engineer, shut off the head end power because you're giving oxygen to this fire. And you know what he said to me? His name was Orville Mustard. I know him. I knew him well. He said, how do I do it? I said, where's the head end power? On your lead unit or rear unit? It was on the rear unit out of Seattle. And he said, what do you mean? What do you mean, where's the head end power? Well, make a long story short, I had to put shoes on and run down the railroad, down to the locomotives, and I could hear the one roaring, F-40s. So I killed that. Well, to make a long story short, this all ended up in an investigation with the NTSB. Everybody know what the NTSB is? Have you ever heard of falsifying a document from the NTSB? Gentlemen, it happened to me. All the statements that I made about the Southern Pacific way of not allowing me to ride on my own train on their own railroad at the investigation in Seattle, it was taken out of that manual. I never saw it. You guys can see it. You guys can go back and find out. I forget, I don't remember the exact date that this happened, but it's a fire in Dunsmuir, California. 2 people died over this. They falsified that document. I could not believe when I read the book, they wanted me to sign for it, and I refused to sign it because it was not legal, it was not right. So I was going to take the NTSB to court. See, I can talk like this right now because there's nothing that bothers me anymore. What can they do? Throw me in jail now? No. What happened when I accused them of this? I was going to sue the NTSB, and I had all the rights in the world to do it. Why didn't it happen? Who was the president at the time? Mr. Claytor. Mr. Claytor talked me out of it. You know why? You know what he said? He said if I ever did allow that to happen, he said the government would shut off the money coming to Amtrak, and we wouldn't even have an Amtrak there. So he said, if you want to kill Amtrak, you go ahead and do it. But he says, I'm asking you not to do it. And I backed down. There's a story behind this. I mean, I could go by and tell you a lot of stories, but especially this one right here, where I'm just trying. Oh, by the way, these are the instructors. There's me right there. We're the engineer instructors for Amtrak. That was my boss, Steve Cavalier. Fine guy, fine guy. Nick Roello, wonderful guy. I mean, these guys, but these were the engineer trainers at the time. That's me right there with a big pot belly on me. That might be interesting. I want to show you something if I can find it. Oh yeah, look at this. Look where it is. 90. Almost 90 mile an hour. Well, I got one even better. Oh, this is 90, 93. 93. I used to run the AM7 down to Washington at 125 to 135, and that's about as fast as I ever went. Trying to see if I can find. I mean, I could go on all night about this, but I'm to enjoy what you're seeing here. This is what an F40 looks like when it runs into a truck full of logs. Look at it. That's the cab. There's the controller. That's the 301. I have a lot of wreck photos. 315 in Beach Grove getting ready to be re-engined. It's all smashed up here in the front. Amtrak gave me a really great. Would you rather see some old stuff on the CNJ rather than Amtrak? But Amtrak is where I really got to use a photograph. I mean, a camera, because I took a lot of camera pictures of the of parts for study for school. I had a slide projector. I had all my stuff. Remember, geez, we used stuff like this. Remember the paint job with them? Oh, there's some pantographs. That was a locomotive. To me, running a GG1 was really one of the crowning glories in my idea. You ever see a half a GG1? No, it isn't. I got one here of a half. That had a. Surprised what they had the Metroliners. You heard of the Metroliners? This is a car right here, 2001. Put many a day on that car. The vice president, he wanted me to go everywhere there was a locomotive trouble. He wanted me to go with him. I used to spend a lot of time on that inspection car with him. Babysit the locomotive. I could tell you a little quick story about Mr. Clater was the president of Amtrak. I'll tell you, he's one of the finest men I ever met. But my boss would tell me, "Hey, I want you to go to Seattle right away. Get to Seattle because you got to be on the train for tomorrow." I said, "Why?" Why? He said, "Mr. Clater's riding, but he's not riding. He's not riding in his business car. He's riding a regular sleeper." Oh, so I fly out to Seattle, and of course he always told me, "Don't go near him. I mean, don't go near Clater. Stay away from him." I said, "Yeah, what am I going to do? I'm not going to bother him." So, I like to ride the locomotives, but Clater also does. I didn't know Clater was a kind of a frustrated engineer. He loved to run trains. And he gets up on the engine. Of course, we left Seattle. Let's see, he got on at Portland. That's right, he got on at Portland. And I saw him coming. I couldn't get away fast enough so he could see me. So he saw me. He said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "Oh, the locomotive's just out of the back shop." See, I don't lie about anything. And I said, it's just out of it's just been out of Beech Grove, and it says it's really the second run it's been on. And he says, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm the babysitter. If something happens, they want me to fix it. He said, is that what you get paid to do? You're a babysitter? And I said, well, he didn't call it that. And he says, oh, no. He says, I know why you're here. Why? Because I'm here. I said, no, Mr. Clater, I didn't. I knew you were on the train, but I had no idea that you're going to run it. He said, well, can I run the engine? And I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, you can. And I said, I'll watch what you do. And I knew the speeds and that kind of stuff. So he ran the engine he goes from Portland to Eugene. And we stop at Eugene. And of course, he gets off the engine. And so that's number one. Number two, I get a call to report to New Orleans. I fly to New Orleans from Chicago. Of course, I'm living in Chicago. And I fly to Chicago, I fly to New Orleans, and who do I get down there but Graham Clater and his brother Bob. I think all of you know who Bob Clater is. He ran that 1218 down there on the Norfolk and Western. Well, Bob Clater was the president of the Norfolk and Western at that time, or Norfolk Southern. But I get the both of them. Of course, I don't go back to the business car. So I get on the engine and we go to the engine. I get as far as Jackson, Mississippi. And with train stops, and who walks up along the side? Here comes Clater. I see him in the mirror and I said to the engineer, I said, oh man, here comes Clater. What? I said, he'll want to run the engine. I said, hey, I got to ask you. I'm not ordering you that, but he said, oh, I don't care. Later comes up on the engine and looks at me. He says, what are you doing here? Are you babysitting this engine? I said, yeah. And he said, no, you're not. Your boss told you to ride the train because of me, didn't he? I said, I can't lie to you. I said, you're right. He said, that's bullshit. He said, there's no reason why you have to be putting all these miles in to babysit me. And I said, well, I'm not babysitting you. I said, if something happens to the engine, he wants me to get it going and so we can get on our way. Oh, man. I think I bumped into him maybe 4 or 5 times in my career with him. But he was always, and he went after my boss. He chewed my boss out for that. He said, well, how come you send that Wikman and do all the dirty work? Why don't you maintain these locomotives so he doesn't have to be doing that kind of work? Well, I still ended up doing it. I kind of enjoyed it. Trying to think. Does everybody remember the P-30s? Everybody remember them? They're, in my opinion, I thought that was one of the best locomotives we had. So let me go back to the number.
Unfortunately, Mike, we're just about at time. So
I know it. There's so much. There's so much. I'd like to do this again sometime. It was just
absolutely, we'll absolutely have to come back. There's
it's a lot of fun, and hey,
yeah.
I've enjoyed this no end. I mean, I could go all night. You know that. It's hey, that's all I got left. That's all I got left are memories. I can't run trains anymore.
Incredible career.
So I hope you understand, people. I hope I didn't bore you with. I didn't want to make it a me. It's not me. It's what I did, and I had a lot of fun. And I had a career on the railroad that just can't. I'm amazed sometimes at what I did, what I was allowed to do. And I had great bosses. I mean, I had wonderful bosses. I mean, they had to put up with me. They want to hear some of them, but okay, I'll tell you. I live here in San Antonio, and I plan on staying here until I pack it in because I like it. I own the house, and if anybody of any of your group comes down here, get a hold of me. My gosh, I'm hoping that she see Chuck Walsh come down. He's talking about coming down and let me do a episode of the cutoff. Kind of hoping he does come down. Oh my God, a new bed. That bed in the guest room. Okay. Well,
Well,
thank you all for your attention. And as I say, I hope it wasn't boring or anything like that.
Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you so much for making the time. We'll definitely have you back sometime to continue the stories. They seem to have been really well enjoyed by all the people who tuned in.
Good, wonderful.
And thank you for starting Tri-State. It's a wonderful group. I'm glad it's still around.
I'm proud of Mike, what he's done all those years, how much he's done to make it the largest organization in the NRHS at the time. Okay, guys, you want me to zip out?
Yeah, we'll be in touch, Mike, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here we go. Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Night. Merry Christmas to all of you.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas and that. Maybe you have a great new year.
You too, Mike.
Going to. Okay, bye.
Good night.